Psalm 30, verse 2. It's just one sentence, but it's the testimony of the psalmist. And it said, "O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me." It started in 1997. I want to tell you what God did. One of the things that God did for me. It started in 1997, as I said, when I went into a physician appointment. And back then, if you had a blood test, at least where I was, the doctor I went to at the time, if you had lab work done or test of any kind, you had to make a second appointment to come in and hear from the physician what the results were. And so I had a previous appointment. The doctor ordered a blood test. I came back the next week to get the blood test results. And they didn't put me in an exam room, put me in his office. And so I'm sitting in a seat on the other side of his desk. And he said, "Your lab work came back just fine. Everything's good, no problems at all." And then he turned around with his back to me because he was looking for something over to the side. I had never seen a printout of lab test results before, and so I thought, well, I'm curious. And he had left it sitting on the edge, the paper sitting on the edge of his desk. And so I don't know whether I should have or not, but I reached up, picked up the paper, just so I could look at it. I'd never seen one before. That red blood count, normal. White blood count, normal. You've probably seen those now. They usually let us see those reports. And we get all the way down, and I see one particular number, and it has an H by it, and it's in red. And I thought, well, that's interesting. He just told me everything was fine, everything's normal. I asked him a question. I said, "There's this one on the test, creatinine, it says it's high." It was 1.5. And he didn't turn or look at me yet. He said, "Oh, it's a little high," but he said, "That happens sometimes. Next time you have a blood test, it'll probably be normal." I said, "Okay." And still, I'm curious. I just ask a lot of questions. I usually do that. And I said, "What does creatinine measure?" And again, his back is still to me. And he said, "It measures your kidney function." "Oh," I said. "You may not know it, but my maternal grandfather died of kidney disease when he was 44 years old. And my doctor, I still remember his face, his back to me, he turned and looked over his shoulder and said, 'That changes everything.'" From that point on, from that day until now, every 3 to 6 months, I have blood work. Yeah, they've been poked a lot. I have, growing up, I didn't like needles at all. I was terrified of needles. I've kind of gotten used to them by now because I had to. From 1997 to 2000, we just continued to watch, and sure enough, my numbers never went back to normal. It went from the 1.5, which is just slightly high, to 1.7, and then to 1.9. But not very fast and not very bad. We were just watching it. In 2000, my wife and kids and I moved to Arkansas, and I became the pastor at the First General Baptist Church of Heber Springs. We got established with a lot of new things, of course, a new physician. I told my physician, Dr. Frank Bivens, about my lab work and concern about my kidneys, and he said, "I need to get you into a nephrologist, a kidney doctor." Okay. So he then his office made an appointment with me to see Dr. Greg Bienvenu. Dr. Bienvenu has since retired, and I was his longest patient. The first thing he said on my first visit after looking at my lab results, we need to do a kidney biopsy so we know what's going on. It's one thing to watch it, but it's another to really know what's going on. And so went and had this surgical procedure where I had a kidney biopsy. Results came back later. I had what's called FSGS. That's the easy way to say it. Focal segmental glomeruli Sounds awful, doesn't it? Focal segmental glomeruli I like the way that in medicine they come up with these interesting names for things that really, if you translate them into everyday English, they're really simple. The glomeruli means the glomeruli were dying. In your kidneys, there are two parts that filter your blood. Take the bad things out, leave the good things in. And the first one are glomeruli, and they're like little fingers. By the way, if you're a medical professional and you're watching this, and I don't get this precisely right, please forgive me, I'm a layman in medical terms, but there are these little glomeruli, and they're like little fingers in your kidney, and as your blood flows through them, they filter out the bad stuff. And then there's these tubules, and the tubules finish the process. As it, and the good blood goes out, and the impurities are passed. My glomeruli were dying slowly. That's what glomeruli means. And it was probably triggered by a strep infection, because one of the things that can happen if you get a strep infection in your throat, it can settle in your kidneys and start this process. For some people, it goes really, really fast. And in a very short time, they're in a very bad way. For some people, like me, it's a very slow process. I was grateful for that. Now, I can't really say that me discovering this in 97 was a miracle, but it was certainly a blessing to have discovered it that early. Most people with kidney disease don't know it because the only symptom is fatigue, and the increasing fatigue is so slow, you don't even notice it. I knew I had it, and I didn't notice it. And so most people with kidney disease don't find out until they got to have a kidney now. I was blessed in that way. So, from 2000 to 2008, we continued to monitor it. Now, with the glomeruli dying off, here was something that my physician made a point of telling me more than once. With kidney disease, your kidneys never get better. You can have another illness that affects your kidneys and causes them to not function properly for a while. But when that is taken care of, your kidney function can return. But with kidney disease, once you lose kidney function, it does not come back. Those glomeruli were dying, and they couldn't resurrect them. Kidneys just don't get better. I also noticed that every time I would get sick, and it didn't matter how bad I was sick or not bad I was sick, if I got sick, the next time I would go see my doctor, the kidney function would be just a little worse. And it was just ticking down slowly. And then, the first thing God did. In 2008, I went in for my regular kidney doctor appointment with Dr. Bienvenu. And he looked at me and said, I've seen your lab report. And he said, within the next 12 months, you are going to need a kidney transplant. We need to get you set up with Baptist Health Kidney Transplant Clinic. We need you to go there to get set up so that we're not in a rush whenever you get to that point that you have to have it. You're not going to be in a rush, because at that point I was at 20% kidney function, and you go on the transplant list when you're at 15%. So I was pretty close. And he said, with the way yours has been ticking down like a clock, he said, by the end of the year you will need a kidney. I didn't want to hear that. Even though I knew this was coming, I didn't want to hear it. So I was kind of down. Pamela and I went to Baptist Health, to the kidney transplant clinic. They were wonderful people. Wonderful people. Everybody smiled at us. They understood what we were going through, and they were encouraging. They were loving. They were very informative. They were good folks. I was depressed. They were good folks. We went through this whole process. The last thing they did when our 2 or 3 hour visit was over was they took me down to the lab at the hospital, and they took like 14 vials of blood and said, well, we're going to run these tests and then we'll let you know. Sure enough, the blood test results came back. I was at 20% kidney function, and it confirmed by 2 blood tests that within 12 months I was very likely to need a kidney transplant. I still wasn't very happy. I was depressed. My family started praying. My church family, I shared that news with them. They began to pray. And I remember one particular person coming up to me and saying, I'm going to pray for a miracle. And I thought, thank you. I didn't really know how to pray. I mean, I knew I had this illness. I knew something had to be done. I just prayed for God to guide me through this and all. But one person said, I'm going to pray for a miracle. 3 months later, I had new lab work. Went to see my doctor, Dr. Bienvenu. I walk into his office in the exam room, and we start to have our conversation. He said, well, I've looked at your lab report. You were at 45% kidney function.
Oh, wow.
I thought you told me kidneys don't get better. They don't. I was at 20% kidney function 3 months ago. 2 blood tests showed that. He said, that's right. Now I'm at 45% kidney function. Yes. But kidneys don't get better. No. Okay. So we went through a conversation, and of course all this time I've been doing some lifestyle changes, trying to help this progression of this disease to slow down, to not go very fast, make it go as long as I could. The kidneys don't get better. I don't know why God made my kidneys better. Not healed, but improved. I don't know why he did that, but there's no other explanation. In fact, Dr. Bienvenu looked at me at the end of my appointment with him, and he said, Dennis, whatever you are doing, keep doing it, including prayer. I wasn't depressed anymore. And God gave me 8 more years. I don't know why, I just know he did. And I give God the glory for that. But that's not all that God did. Sometime later, between 2008 and 2015, I don't remember exactly when, or I'd give you the date. I was driving through Indianapolis on Interstate 65, going from the north to the south. I had probably been to my sister's in West Lafayette on I-65, headed south, going past Indianapolis, probably down to see my brother who lives in the Louisville area. And when you go through a major city these days, you have the choice. You have the choice of going on the roundabout. In Indianapolis, it's either 265 or 465, I forget. And you go around the city, or you can go right through the middle. I-65 goes right through the middle, and it wasn't rush hour, so I thought, I'm going to go right through town. I kind of like to see the tall buildings. I'm going through town, and the way that the highway goes through, you're headed south. It kind of turns to the left so that you're going east. Then it turns south again and heads straight into downtown. And you're looking at the tall buildings. And then right before you're going to run over the tall buildings, it turns left again. I'm giving you the details for a reason. Because I want you to know this is what happened and this is what God did. On that stretch where you're headed straight to the middle of downtown, to the big tall buildings, I'm I'm listening to the music on the radio, Christian music, which I usually listen to. Once in a while, I listen to other stuff. And my mind was just kind of bouncing from one thing to another. You know how you kind of get zoned out when you're driving? And I look up, and straight ahead, before you made the left in downtown, there's a building with this big red and white logo on it, and it says, IU Health. Now, this may sound strange to some of you. Some of you may hear this and say, you're crazy. I promise you I'm not. But I looked up at the highway, I looked at that building, and the instant I looked at that IU Health logo, I heard these words, this is where you will have your kidney transplant. And I was shocked. Where did that thought come from? I wasn't even thinking about my health. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular. And so I began to talk to the Lord and said, God, where'd that come from? Did I just think something really strange? Did I just pop into my head? Why? I'm living in Arkansas at the time. I'm already set up with a nephrologist. I'm already set up with Baptist Health Kidney Clinic. Why in the world would I drive all the way up here to get a kidney transplant? That doesn't make any sense. And so I'm kind of having this conversation with the Lord. It's like, God, I need to understand this. Was that just me thinking something just out of the blue? Or was that you? Or what was that? One of the things I've learned about God is when God speaks and you go, what? It's probably God. By the time I'm leaving the Indianapolis area, headed towards Southport and Franklin, on toward the Louisville area, I finally said, okay, Lord, I have no idea what that was. If that was you, then I pray that it would come true. But if it was not you, help me forget about it. Just help me forget about it, never think of it again. And I just let it go. God, it's up to you. I, at that point, didn't know if that was God or not. Something else that happened sometime between 2008 and 2015. Pamela and I were having a conversation one time. We, on occasion, would have conversation about how I was doing health-wise. And she looked at me in this particular conversation and she said, Dennis, when you need a kidney transplant, I will be your donor. And I thought to myself, oh, how sweet. And then I said, Pamela, you know that they have to do a lot of testing. And you have to be a match. It's got to be blood test, blood type match. It's got to be enzyme match, and it's got to be antibody match, and who knows what else kind of things. They have to check your health out to make sure you're healthy enough and there's no problem. And I'm trying to prepare her for the day when they say, no, you can't give him a kidney. And then she stopped me in the middle of that speech I was trying to give, and she said, no, I didn't say I was going to be tested. I said, I will be your donor. You see, she'd been praying about this for quite a while, as you can imagine. And somehow or the other, the Lord said to her, this is what's going to happen. You can ask her how she came to that realization. Between 2008 and 2015, ever so often, we would have a conversation about how I was doing. And again, she would remind me, Dennis, I want you to know, whenever you need a kidney, I will be your donor. I would start that speech again. Well, they have to test the enzymes and they have to test the antibodies. And she said, no, I will be your donor. I don't know how I know that. I just know it. You know, fellas, when your wife said, when she puts her foot down, that's the third thing God did. It'll all tie together in a moment. Let me tell you number 4. In 2012, I realized that I had 30 years of ministry in as a General Baptist minister. For a lot of people in a lot of vocations, you put in 30 years at anything, it's time to retire. And, if you can. I got to 30 years, I looked at my retirement account and thought to myself, I can't retire. But I also realized at that point, I was really tired. I'd been serving in ministry for 30 plus years. I was physically worn out, probably because of the kidney issue. Didn't realize that was at that point. I was physically tired. I was emotionally tired. I was spiritually tired. I just needed a break. So I resigned from the pastorate I was in at the time and said, folks, I just got to have a break. I took a job at our local school district, and I just took a break. Pamela and I visited a few churches just to be anonymous, like Johnny Hibbs is doing now. Just to be anonymous and to see some friends. And it was a good relaxing time. After a couple of years, I thought to myself, Lord, I'm ready. I'm ready to get back in the ministry saddle. I'm ready to find that place to serve you, Lord. I'm ready. So you just show me where. I thought about, hey, maybe God wants me in education for the rest of my life. But no, he made it clear I need to get back in ministry, and I was ready. And so I checked out several different things. I looked at different opportunities, and no doors opened until I ran across the name of this organization called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. They are the largest, or one of the largest, campus ministries and the oldest in the country. And so I applied in April of 2014. Now, they had a long hiring process. I did a couple of interview conversations. I visited an InterVarsity event. I had a formal interview, and then in October of 2014, I was provisionally hired. Because you see, InterVarsity is a missions agency, and I'm a missionary. And you know what missionaries do? We raise our support. And we have to raise our support so that we can do the ministry that God has called us to do. I still work with InterVarsity. And so in October of 2014, I was provisionally hired, which means we want you to be a part of the InterVarsity family. Now you can start raising money. And so I did. I started talking with individuals, with churches, trying to raise funds, raise commitments so that I could do this ministry. I knew it was going to take a while. I actually began a couple of events that were training to work with InterVarsity. One in February about fundraising, and one in June, which was the orientation for new staff. And by the summer, my supervisor, Ann Hong, looked at my account, looked at the commitments that I had, and she said, Dennis, I think it's time we set a date that you start working full-time for InterVarsity. I thought, wow, I didn't think I was quite there, but okay, I'm ready. And we set the date, December 16th of 2015, I was going to start full-time work with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. I continued to raise money all during that time. Did I mention earlier? I think I did. That every time I got sick, my kidneys got worse. Now, I had told them before I was hired about my kidney situation. See, kidney disease is one of those things that you could live with it for years, or it could go off today. You just don't know. And I told them, I said, it's a ticking time bomb. I just don't know when it's going to go off. And they said, okay, we'll deal with it. December 16th was my date. I was going to start. I resigned from my position with the school. And I was preparing to start on December 16th. On December 4th, I had an appointment with my nephrologist. By the way, over the summer, I had been sick. Food poisoning. Something I ate. Was in the hospital for 4 days. The reason I was in the hospital for 4 days is because they were afraid that my kidneys were going to crash. They didn't, but they did drop. So in December of 2015, I went in to see my nephrologist, and he said, Dennis, you need a kidney transplant now. I said, Doc, I'm starting a new job in 12 days. He said, well, I don't know what to tell you. You need a kidney now. Okay. I called my supervisor. InterVarsity did two things for me. This is what God did. Two things. Number one, I talked to Ann Hong, and I told her what had happened. I said, Ann, does this change anything? And she said, no. You were honest with us and told us about this ahead of time. You've raised the money. You're going to work for InterVarsity on the 16th. I was quite relieved. Here's why. 2 reasons. Well, I'll get to the second one in a minute, but here's the first reason. If I had stayed with the school corporation job, by March, I was so sick, there was no way I could do the job, and I would have had to resign. I didn't have disability insurance. I would have had to resign, and thus would have had no income. Pam was working. It would have been financially devastating for us to lose half of our income. InterVarsity said, you can go ahead and work for us. Do what you can. We'll work with it. I was quite blessed with that. So I started on the 16th. Dr. Bienvenu sent my records to the Baptist clinic and said, Mr. Powell needs a kidney. Let's get him in. On the first Thursday of February, I had an appointment. And on the last Thursday of January, I got a phone call. And they said, we have to cancel your appointment. No, you mean reschedule, don't you? No, we mean cancel. We mean cancel. I said, how can you cancel the appointment for somebody who needs a kidney transplant? And she said, well, unfortunately, we're closing our transplant clinic. And so we're only going to be able to help those patients who are already in our system for the next 6 months. You have to go somewhere else. She said, there's another hospital nearby. You can go to them. Call your nephrologist, get it transferred. Okay. I immediately called my nephrologist office. They transferred my records. They told me, yeah, we're going to transfer your records over. They transferred my records over. They said, you'll get a call in about a week for your appointment. A week passed, no call. Another week passed, no call. I started calling them. They didn't answer the phone. I called again, left a message. They didn't return my call. This happened over and over and over. So I made an appointment with my nephrologist. His first question to me was, when's your next appointment? Or when's your appointment? I said, I don't have one. How can you not have an appointment? You need a kidney now. I said, I explained, they don't return my calls. He called them. They said they'd get me in as soon as they could. And all this time, my health is deteriorating fast. I wasn't able to get on dialysis yet because you have to be connected with a kidney clinic, transplant clinic, before they can start dialysis. I don't know why that works that way, but it does. What I didn't know was that the second hospital, not only were they absorbing all the patients from another hospital, but one of their surgeons had passed away unexpectedly. They were overwhelmed and could not keep up. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't have that information at the time. I was on a phone call in March, a Zoom phone call. We use Zoom. We've been using Zoom with InterVarsity for a long time, so being online things are not new to us. So I'm on a conversation, my third conversation with the staff that I supervise with InterVarsity, and I felt horrible. I told them, I said, I've planned for a 90-minute meeting, but I don't think it's going to be that long because I feel horrible. And Greg, who lives in Indianapolis, said, Dennis, I hate to see you this way, and I'm sorry you can't get an appointment. And I'll get this title wrong, I'm sure, but you'll understand the concept. He said, you see, Greg worked at IUPUI, where the IU School of Medicine is. He said, Dennis, I know the chief of transplant surgery at IU Health. Would it be okay for me to contact them and see if they can help you? My knee-jerk reaction was to say, it'll be okay. God's going to take care of me. But something made me keep my mouth shut. And I said, Greg, I feel so terrible. I'm not turning anything down. The next day, he sent me an email and said, Send this information to this email address. 2 days later, I got a phone call from Christine Mulvey who said, Dennis, can you be here Monday? I hadn't put it together. I bet you have. Made an appointment. Pamela and I went up there. We met with Dr. Tabor. I met with Christine Mulvey. We talked all about it, and they scheduled a bunch of medical tests. Got me started on the process. Got started on the process. Went back about a month later for Education Day. Education Day is when a whole bunch of people who are all in line to get a transplant come in and learn about the process. You meet with all kinds of people. You figure out what's going to happen. Went through all of that. And at the end of that, the last thing we did, Pamela was blood test was taken. I was finished with all of my routine tests for the transplant before the second hospital in Arkansas called me back to set an appointment. They took 15 or 16 vials of Pamela's blood. About a week later, we get home. And Pamela works in the library. It's what she does here. It's what she did in Arkansas. And, you're not supposed to answer your personal phone while you're working because you've got responsibilities. And typically she would not, but all of a sudden her phone starts ringing and it has an Indianapolis area code. She answered the phone. She didn't have any kids with her. She answered the phone. And it was a nurse coordinator, transplant coordinator who said, Pamela, you're a match. Pamela got off the phone. She called me. I just got a phone call, Dennis. I'm a match. I got off the phone with her, and within just a few minutes, I get a phone call from Christine Mulvey, the coordinator for me. And she said, Dennis, I just wanted to let you know, we have a match for you. I said, yeah, I know. What are the odds? They're not very high, by the way. At that point on, it was finish up a little bit more testing, preparation, and set a date. August the 15th, 2016, Pamela and I were going to the hospital together at 5 a.m. Eastern Time. We go into the hospital, and because she's the donor, she goes in first because they have to start with her first. They take her back, leave me out in the waiting room by myself for a little bit. But eventually all of my family shows up, much of Pam's mom and dad showed up. And we're both in the hospital, and she's on that side of the hallway in a room, and I'm on this side of the hallway. They had us close together. You know how that goes. If you've ever had surgery, you got everybody and his brother coming in to check this or check that, put in an IV and answer questions, and on and on and on and on it goes. But my eyes were across the hall at the curtain I couldn't see through. After about an hour and a half, 2 hours, nurse came in and she said, Dennis, they're about to take your wife down for surgery. If you'd like to see her before she goes. I said, absolutely. She pulled the curtain open. I don't think she really waited for my answer as she pulled the curtain open because she knew what my answer would be. And then Pamela's curtain was pulled, and they wheeled her out there, and then they turned her so her head was on this end as they're going to go that way. And she looked at me and had the biggest smile on her face I have ever seen. I've never seen anybody excited to go to surgery. But she was smiling from ear to ear. Bigger smile than she had on her wedding day, and that one was pretty big. They took her back. About an hour and a half later, they took me back. And we spent some time together in the hospital, her in her room and I in mine. Today, we are both healthy and able to do pretty much what we want to do. Getting a little older, so we're still slowing down a little bit, but God's been good. And I hope you noticed all the puzzle pieces that God put together. And when I tell this story, I put it this way: this is what God did.
Yes, I did.
And I've